Hi, thanks for joining me today. My name is Lindsay. I'm the designer behind Doing the Most Design, and you can find me on Ravelry at LindsayDTMD. I can't wait to show you what I've got in store for you for today's video. This is going to be the first video in my tutorial series for how to complete the techniques necessary to do my most recent design project, which is a hat called Glistening Snowflake. If you're here just to learn the technique, awesome. If you're here to make this hat, even better. Thank you so much for your support in purchasing the pattern. In this video, I'm only going to be talking about doing a brioche setup round and then how to do what is called two-pass brioche. And it'll become evident why it's called two-pass brioche when we get to that point. Let's dive into how to actually get started. If you aren't going to make this hat with only two colorways, which is what it's written for, but you can zhuzh it up a little bit into four colorways. You can start with whatever colors that you want. I have some tips about how to select colors in that previous video, but in any event, I love the way that brioche looks with a variegated yarn offset by a solid color or monochromatic yarn. To that point, though, I want to make a decision between these two yarns about which one is my main color and which one is my contrast color. So taking a look again here at the demo hat, whatever color you start with is going to be the color of this cast on at the bottom. And that is the only color that is identical from the front and the back of this fabric, as you can see here. Everything else is going to be mirror image. So here we have columns in this fuchsia color. Turn it inside out. Our columns are that contrast color, which is the same color actually as this ball of yarn right here. I think that brioche knitting looks best when it's anchored by a solid color or a monochromatic yarn versus I think the ribbing looks the best when it is the variegated. And then on the inside, even when the columns are going to be the variegated yarn, I think that's still anchored by the solid color. I think that is what looks best for my style personally. So I'm going to go ahead and set aside the variegated yarn, and we are going to get started here with this as my main color. And now that I have all of my stitches on here, don't forget if you've lost track, like if you're a new knitter and you forget which direction you're supposed to be knitting in, what we are about to do is connect. We're going to join to work in the round, which means that my working yarn here that now feeds out from my yarn ball, I need this coming from the right hand needle onto I hold my yarn continental style, so I need it in my left hand, but coming from my right hand needle. So what I'm going to take a second to do right now is I'm going to go through and untwist anything that looks like it's twisted. I'm going to turn my work over like this and just kind of smooth out and make sure that my cast on round is not getting twisted up before I join. If early on your round gets twisted up, it's not the end of the world, but it can be very annoying and can maybe even lead to you having to restart your project. Now, this very first round, because of the cast on, it's always the tightest round to knit. So I'm going to create a magic loop. What I'm doing is I'm pulling my strands, my loops here to the end of my knitting needle attachment, and then I'm going to bend the cord so that I'm creating a little bit of a gap, and then moving this short spot close to the tip so that I can move all of the other stitches downward and move the ones on my left hand needle up the needle. After I do this, I'm going to really double check one more time that I didn't twist stitches. All right, so now I have all of my stitches in position. I am not going to knit one round and then start my brioche. I'm going directly into the brioche knitting. Now, if I were a smart person, I would have thought about showing you how to do this on like size 10 knitting needles with super bulky yarn, but here we are. So we're knitting this first stitch. All right, now whatever beginning of round marker that you have, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that this little channel right here, if you repeat this channel multiple times, this can turn into laddering. This can turn into a gap where your beginning of round marker was. So please be sure to like maybe pull that stitch a little more snugly than you normally would. Okay, before we continue on, I'm going to pull these stitches out so that you can see them as individual stitches. So what I'm thinking as I stretch these stitches out like this is, in my mind's eye, I'm imagining that each one of these is a person standing out on the sidewalk outside on a very cold day, and none of them have coats. So what I want to do is give everybody a coat, but I only have enough coats to give to half of the people in line this day. So the very first stitch did not get a coat, it got knit. The second stitch, I do have a coat for this person. The third stitch, I'm going to knit. The fourth person, I have a coat, knit, coat, knit, coat. Let me show you how I put a coat on these little people. So in order to give them a coat, I'm bringing my yarn to the front of my work like this. I'm putting my needle into that second stitch purlwise. And as I move the needle rightward so that I'm taking that stitch off of my left hand needle, I'm bringing the yarn from front to back. This is a slip yarn over. I am probably going to say slip over more than once. I'm so sorry. My brain is not wired to be consistent. All right, so here at this next stitch, I'm going to knit this person. I do not have a coat to give them. There we go. And then the next person, I'm bringing my yarn to the front of my work. I am slipping purlwise, so I'm entering from right to left. I'm going to bring my yarn to the back of the work and slip that stitch off. Now, ultimately, what is happening is that we are creating, it looks like additional stitches, but we're not creating additional stitches. We're creating special units within our knitting. So let's take a look at what we've achieved over here on the right hand needle. As you can see here, there are going to be some lonely stitches that are just completely vertical. So those are the stitches that we knit. And then you'll see some stitches that look like a vertical, very closely followed by a slant. When you get to working in this brioche technique, eventually this is going to look, instead of like a vertical with a slant, it's going to look like a very close knit X, or maybe the stitches will look crossed over each other, like maybe crossed legs or something like that. Okay. So when I am working my brioche knitting, let's say that I get a phone call and I have to put my knitting down, something requires the use of my attention or my hands. When I pick up my knitting again, what I want to do is take a look at my right hand, and I want to see, is my most recent stitch completely vertical, or is it vertical with a slash right behind it? And this is just for the brioche setup round. And then we'll talk about how to read your knitting for the passes when we do double pass or two pass brioche. So right here, you can see I have a singular stitch followed very closely by a slant because I'm still holding this yarn for this yarn over. That means that my next stitch that I need to complete is going to be a knit stitch. And you will work this 2-stitch repeat all the way around the round. And you will eventually get into the muscle memory of it. If you're first learning this technique, put your whole foot in it. You're going to have to give it your full attention. But that's okay. That's what we do because we are learning things. All right, I've reached my first stitch counter, and I can double check myself that I am doing this technique properly, because if the repeat is a knit and then a slip yarn over, I can make sure that I've done it right because the slip yarn over should always be my second stitch, which means it's the stitch that immediately precedes my markers. And that means that the stitch directly after my marker should always be a knit stitch. So I offer that up to you just so we can always check ourselves, kind of like how your math teacher would tell you how to prove your work so you can double check your own math after you had done a new math technique. That's all I'm giving you right now with that bit of advice. All right, so I'm going to continue like this all the way around this first round of work. And then when I get to the beginning of round marker, we'll talk about how to do the first pass of our 2-pass brioche. Hey, have you been learning? Have you been laughing? Leave me a comment down below about something that you got out of this video and hit that like and subscribe button for me, dude. Thanks. At this point, I have now knit all the way through to my beginning of round marker. And again, as a little bit of a double check, I just want to confirm to myself that my final stitch is a slip yarn over, which it is. And then the stitch prior to that should be a worked knit stitch. This is a good opportunity to like pause yourself and go through and check every single one of your stitches in case, especially if this is the first time that you are knitting in brioche. Then I'm moving the beginning of round stitch marker like this, and I'm going to use that to sort of sandwich that yarn in place. Now, this yarn over is not going to go anywhere so long as this tension around the needle is a little tight. So I am going to make sure that that is the case by pulling that yarn to the front. That is going to be one thing that I attempt to do every single time. I want to be very consistent with every single round or pass that I knit. When I'm done with that color, I'm going to bring the yarn to the front before I start the next color. All right, so just like we did with the first tail for our main color, like this, I'm going to hold out 6 to 8 inches because this is the length that I want my tapestry needle to use when I'm going to weave into my ends later. And then using this as an informal marker, I'm holding that yarn with my right hand, tensioning with my left. And then what we want to do is the last time that we started a round, we did knit, slip yarn over. This time we want to do the complementary motions to that, which is going to be a yarn over slip. And then again, these two are together. This is a unit. It's not two separate stitches. We are going to purl those 2 stitches together. All right. And meanwhile, I'm holding this tail with my right hand so that it doesn't shorten up on me and then I don't have anywhere to use my tapestry needle. Since my first action for this stitch is just to slip it over purlwise and do a yarn over, I'm going to bring my yarn, my new color, my contrast color, in front of my right hand needle. So I'm underneath both needles and over the right hand. And then I'm slipping this purlwise. That's my very first action. My next action is, you can see there's that little triangle that is formed between these 2 stitches. It's pretty closed up on this one, so that's fine. But I'm going to now purl these 2 stitches. They're not really stitches, but I'm going to purl these 2 things together, bringing my yarn in front as if to purl, putting my needle under both of those loops, both the stitch and the yarn over, and then purling together. My next stitch is just one little lonely guy. So now I'm thinking again, I got a new shipment of jackets. So all of the people that did not get jackets last time, I'm going to give them a jacket this time. So this knit is standing all tall by itself. I'm bringing my yarn to the front, slipping my needle in purlwise, doing the yarn over, and then that stitch from the left hand to the right hand needle. These next 2, again, this is a unit. Bringing the yarn to the front, needle through both of those loops, and I'm purling them together. And we're going to continue around the entire round like this. This is the first pass of 2-pass brioche. The reason why we are calling it 2-pass brioche is because in order to complete one round, we have to do 2 passes. 2 passes for 1 round of brioche. The round of brioche includes both colors, excluding the setup round. So we haven't done 1 pass and this is the second pass. We did a setup round and now we're doing pass number 1. When I finish and I come back to the beginning of round marker and I start with my main color one more time, that will be the second pass of my first round. I have now knit to the end of my round right before my beginning of round marker, as you can see here. And what I want to do now is double check myself to make sure that I've ended on a purl stitch preceded by a slipped stitch with a yarn over. So those two, they don't look like they're conjoined, but those are a little tandem partnership. This is what I'm talking about with a single stitch, and then here the yarn over slip stitch looks a little bit like 2 fingers crossed, like this. So that is very common whenever you are doing brioche knitting. And then here it looks a little bit more like a triangle, as you can see here. So as I go through, this would be also a very good opportunity for me to stop and scan my entire round, just so I can make sure that I'm getting set up consistently with doing the brioche knitting. So that was the first pass of round 1 that I did with my contrast color. Now, before I move over my marker, I'm going to take that contrast color, not the tail, but the color, and move it to the front. It looks like I've already done that here. So I'm moving it to the front just to absolutely make sure that it doesn't get behind my work and then start getting tangled up. Now with my main color, I'm going to move this to the back of my work. I'm going to put on my beginning of round marker. This gap right here has accentuated since the last time that I have made a round, but I could not do anything with it because I was starting a new color strand with my contrast color. So now I'm going to start to resolve that because my main color is the one that is sort of the adhesive between these two sides, since it's the first color now that I'm repeating. Just like we did in the setup round, this time every stitch that I work will be a knit stitch, and every stitch that I don't work, I'm going to do a slip yarn over. That should be a purl that I'm slip and yarning over. So right here, my very first stitch should have a partner with it. So since it doesn't, I now realize that my tail has flopped over. This is a good little thing to catch yourself with. I'm going to move this out of the way and just grab that tail. Okay, I'm pulling that tail into the correct position now and moving it to the back of my work. And everything feels like a tangled mess. But just like my life, right? So like and subscribe if you can relate. Okay. So here now I have the tail for my main color in the back. I have the tail for the contrast color in the back, and I have the live yarn in the front for my contrast color. So now that I have these two stitches as a unit, what I am going to do now is work that as a knit stitch, which is the exact same gesture that we did whenever we created the setup round. The only difference is that this time our very first stitch, this time all of our knit stitches have combination slip overs with them or yarn overs with them. And then my next stitch here is a standalone purl stitch. This one I want to give this person a jacket. So yarn in front, enter the stitch as if to purl, do the yarn over from front to back, and slip from left needle to right needle. This next stitch is a combination of a knit stitch and a yarn over. So I want to work this as a knit stitch. So with yarn in back, I'm moving my needle in underneath both of those loops to knit them together. My next stitch is a standalone purl. So I'm going to move yarn in front, enter the stitch as if to purl, slip it over to my right needle while also performing that yarn over of moving from front to back with my live yarn. I'm going to continue in this fashion, this exact same 2-stitch repeat, which is going to be a knit, slip yarn over throughout this entire pass. So one more time, going all the way to the beginning of round marker. Now let's take a second to pause here for a little bit and look at some of the work that we've accomplished. So first and foremost, one thing that I am doing on this pass is that every stitch that was previously a knit, I am still knitting that stitch. It's just that I'm knitting it with the yarn overs. So one thing to keep in mind is that your main color that you've selected, which in my case is this darker blue, whenever I am looking at my work, let's use this as an example. Whenever I am looking at my work, my main color is going to be the color of these knit columns on the outside of the fabric that I'm working. And then my purl stitches, I'm going to go through and purl. Those are going to become the knit columns in the contrast color on the inside of my fabric. And then on my next pass, which will be pass 1 of the next round, the stitches that I do a yarn over are going to be these standalone knit stitches. And the next stitch over is a purl yarn over. I'm going to purl those stitches together, just like I did the most recent time that I used the contrast color. So if you think about brioche in the sense that you're always knitting the knits and you're always purling the purls, you're just doing them every other pass. That's exactly what we are doing with this knitting technique. I've made it back to my beginning of round marker, and again, just to double check myself, my final 2 stitches should be a standalone knit stitch and then a slip stitch with a yarn over. With my main color, I'm going to bring the yarn in front again to sort of anchor it in place and get it out of my way. And I'm going to do that before I move over my beginning of round marker. Now, at this point, what we have accomplished is 1 round of brioche. The main color that I just finished knitting was the second pass of 2-pass brioche. So that means that what I should have now as sort of the dominant color sticking out, meaning these singular stitches by themselves, should be my main color, and all of my yarn overs should be in my contrast color. Moving forward with the round, I am taking my yarn, my contrast color from in front, making sure I don't get tangled up in my beginning of round marker here. And then I'm going to start gearing up so that my first stitch, which should be a singular knit stitch, I'm going to do a slip yarn over of that. Now, again, if you are not careful, you can end up getting laddering if you are not pulling your first stitch tight from your last stitch. So I'm going to pull that stitch kind of tight now that I'm finally using my contrast color to bridge over the beginning of round marker. And then, as I said last time, our first purl stitch is going to be putting these 2 loops together. I'm going to move the yarn in front, enter both of those loops, and purl them together. But that was the same stitch that I purled the first time. So again, with my contrast color, every stitch that I'm actually working, I'm going to purl the purls. The knits, I'm going to skip. That's how brioche knitting works. And now that I'm working with the contrast color one more time, this is my first pass for round 2. So you continue that way with like pass 1 with the contrast, pass 2 with the main color, over and over and over again, and you should finish with a main color pass. So the pattern calls for you to do approximately 10 rounds of brioche knitting, but since we are doing 2-pass brioche knitting, that means you should do 20 passes. So you'll be going around about 20 times. And if you are basically on gauge, then that'll give you a brim that's maybe a little bit more than an inch, maybe it's closer to an inch and a half. For me personally, because I'm making this hat for my friend, I want there to be a little bit deeper of a brim. So I'm going to do, instead of 10 rounds, I might do more like 14, just to give it a little bit more balance so that the brim doesn't look too shallow. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you have not done it yet, hit like and subscribe so you can be notified when I put out more content for you. I'd love for you to connect with me on Ravelry at LindsayDTMD. Check out my link tree for a collection of my projects. And if you're able to, leave a cash tip for me at my Ko-Fi page. All links are in the video description below. Don't forget to be kind to yourself as you learn, and thanks for spending your time with me. Bye!